want to get straight over to our panel for some instant reaction. I see Steve's looking down at those numbers. Just want to get his quick take on how you're reading this, Steve.
This morning I told you there was a lot of talk out there about an upside surprise, most of it for seasonal adjustments. I can't tease out how much of this was seasonals at the moment, but the trouble is that you have surpassed what might be expected if this were all seasonals. And I would point, I hope Rick can back me up on this, because it looks like there was a massive revision to December from 216 to 333, as well as revising up November 182 to 173. I haven't had much of a chance to look at the detail. I did see that professional and business services were up strong. You've had private education up 112,000, and leisure and hospitality just up 11. So a lot of that coming there. Government was 36,000. A lot of this was private sector. So I think a piece of this is going to be chalked up when we get a chance to do some work on these numbers to seasonal adjustment issues.
126,000 two-month revision to the upside. And you're right. February, early February, January jobs report always has some surprises.
But this one, especially because of the pandemic, Rick, and what's happened with that, the last January was all messed up, and so the season was messed up. We expected that. The trouble is, this is maybe almost 100,000 over the top forecast I saw that was already elevated because of the seasonals, plus the prior suggests we have some strength. And I'll just close it with this. Maybe Powell knew something on Wednesday when he said, you know what, March ain't on.
Okay, Jason Furman.
I don't know how much he knew, but 10-year note yields are down 26 basis points on the week before the number. Anyway, Jason, continue. I'm sorry.
Take me inside three offices this morning. I want you to take me inside Jay Powell's office. I want you to take me inside the White House. And then I want you to take me inside Trump headquarters. Who's cutting commercials and what are they going to say?
Look, the Council of Economic Advisors was the first place in the government to get this number. They got it midday yesterday. They then transmitted it to the Fed. Jay Powell had no idea this number was coming on Wednesday. But boy,
Jason,
does it
just
confirm.
To be clear, of course he didn't, Jason. Just want to be clear. I'm big in a joke there that basically making a comment that Powell had it right on Wednesday.
Yeah, no, they're not sitting there thinking like, oh, we need to cut now. I mean, there's two halves to the decision to cut. One is, are you worried about economic weakness? Yeah, maybe the January number was a seasonal adjustment, but you have the upward revisions, and you have jobs growing at a pace of about 300,000 a month over the last 3 months. You can't just put all of that down to seasonals. And then the one threat that remains to the economy on the inflation side is that the low inflation is maybe transitory, that we're not in steady state when it comes to the wage side, and you have that 0.6 up. Now, there's one weird thing in this data that I want to understand better. The one thing you didn't mention, Rick, that's on the soft side is hours were down 0.6%. It's really unusual
I did mention it.
Oh, you did mention it. Sorry. I wasn't listening carefully.
I mentioned it.
But that means that weekly earnings were actually down, not up. So people are getting paid more per hour. Per week, they're actually taking home less. If they got, for example, the hours wrong and people worked more hours than they said they worked, then you wouldn't actually have had this big gain in hourly wages. So I think that's one part of the data that
productivity implications as well.
Figure out if it is as hot as it looks.
Doug, so I want to kick it over to Doug. I want to get his perspective on it, and I do want to understand again, and maybe it's a political question. If you're cutting commercials this morning in the White House or over down at Mar-a-Lago, what do those commercials say?
Well, I think the commercials from the White House say jobs, jobs, jobs. The president's created more jobs than anyone else. If you're down in the Trump camp, you're looking at that average hourly earnings and saying, look, we still have an inflation problem. Joe Biden created this inflation problem, and you've had to live with it. So I think that's the clean political read. I mean, the actual read is not clean at all. I mean, this is a very messy report. I guess one question I have, I can't see the report in front of me, is what does the household survey look like? The past 2 months, we've had this complete disconnect between the payroll and the household. So how many jobs do we get on the household side?
Hey, Steve, do you have that number handy?
Coming right now.
Be careful because the population controls change. So December to January.
Yeah, I know.
Right, exactly. Households showed minus 31. That's what I got for household.
Yeah.
Minus
Even with
31.
population
I
controls.
was just looking at.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
this makes me think we see another set of revisions that take away a lot of these January numbers as we go forward. I mean, that number just seems too big, Steve. I'm with you. I mean, it doesn't.
Doug,
doesn't
yeah,
add
Doug.
up.
So
And-
it looks like the seasonals added back 3 million, which is exactly in line with the prior ones. I don't see this as a particularly large seasonal adjustment. Again, we got to do a little more work on this, but
Right.
The household, by the way, is very volatile. So I don't really go there until I absolutely have to, Doug. And I know you think the same.
I
But
don't
was
believe
looking-
The
it
household's
in
not
and of
designed to look
itself.
at changes in levels. That's not what it was meant
I don't
for.
look at it in isolation very much, but it's usually a bit unnerving when it stays disconnected from the payroll. That's a turning point indicator. So I've just been keeping my eye on it. And the distribution of jobs, I guess, the past couple of reports, it's all been health, leisure, hospitality, government, often education. Are we getting broader increases than that right now?
Right.